It is 1842, in the heart of an empire that stretched its reach across the world. This is Victorian Britain, a land of ambition and conquest, of great cities choked with coal smoke and dockyards alive with the ceaseless movement of trade. The British Empire is not merely a collection of territories, it's an unstoppable machine, devouring resources, shipping goods across endless seas, and sending forth men who would seek their fortunes in lands far beyond the shores of home. Into this changing landscape, a child is born, a boy. His childhood was shaped by the hum of industry and the unrelenting march of progress. Railways carved through the countryside, factories roared with the fury of mechanised labour, and the docks, whether in London, Liverpool or Bristol, teemed with ships bound for the furthest corners of the globe. To be born in such a time is to be surrounded by the language of trade, the scent of distant spices wafting through market stalls, and the ever-present murmur of men planning their next venture. For a boy growing up in such a world, there was little room for idleness. One was expected to learn, to understand commerce, to prepare for the life of a man who would take his place in Britain's global machine. Whether through formal education or the lessons absorbed in the streets, he would have learned arithmetic not as an abstract exercise, but as the key to profit. Geography was not simply about distant lands, it was about knowing where to send goods, where fortunes could be made, and where the next opportunity awaited. The world is not a mystery to be pondered, it is a puzzle to be solved, a map to be navigated. And from an early age, he understood that the greatest rewards belonged to those who ventured beyond the familiar. Britain is a land of contradictions, wealthy yet overcrowded, powerful yet ruthless. In the great industrial cities, the air is thick with soot, the streets clogged with factory workers, merchants, and beggars alike. The empire stretches across the world, but for ordinary families, prosperity remains a distant dream. Some accept their fate, labouring under the weight of industry. Others look beyond the horizon. The Cocking family is among them. They make a choice that few dare to make, to leave everything behind, to gamble on a new life in an unknown land. The destination is Australia, a colony no longer just a place of exile for convicts, but a land of opportunity where fortunes are waiting to be made. It is not desperation that drives them, but ambition. Samuel's father, a chemist by trade, sees the potential. The colony is growing, its towns expanding, its industries just beginning to take shape. Skilled men are needed, men who understand chemistry, industry, and the wealth hidden beneath the earth. Australia is a place where a man with knowledge and determination can carve out something new, unshackled from Britain's rigid class system. Perhaps he dreams of land, of business, of a future where his children are not bound by the constraints of the old world. Whatever his reasons, he commits to the journey. And so, they step aboard a ship bound for the farthest reaches of the empire. The voyage is long and unforgiving. The wooden hull groans with every wave, the scent of salt and damp wood filling the air. Below deck, passengers are crammed into tight quarters, their days spent in monotony, their nights in restless sleep, rocked endlessly by the motion of the sea. Weeks turn into months. The sky and ocean merge into an unbroken expanse, stretching in all directions. Storms come without warning, the ship lurching violently, the wind howling through the rigging like a living thing. There are days of unbearable heat, where the sun beats down mercilessly, and nights when the cold cuts through the ship's timbers like a blade. For young Samuel, this is his world now. He learns the rhythm of the sea, the creaking of wood, the crash of waves against the hull, the distant shouts of sailors as they battle wind and tide. He watches as the stars emerge over an ocean so vast it seems endless. There is no turning back. Then, at last, the call goes out. Land. The Cockings step off the ship into a world unlike anything they have ever known. The air is dry and hot, filled with the scent of eucalyptus and dust. The light is different here, sharper, more intense. This is not England. The landscape stretches wide and open, untamed, waiting to be claimed. Australia is not just a new country, it is a test. Here, Samuel Cocking will grow, not as a boy of Britain, but as a child of the frontier. The land is raw, the sun unrelenting. Australia is still young, still forging its identity, still a place where men build their lives with their own hands. For the Cocking family, this is not a land of exile, it is a land of possibility. Samuel's father does not come to this place as a labourer, nor as a man seeking his fortune in the lawless scramble for gold. He arrives with knowledge, with skill, with something more valuable than brute strength, an understanding of chemistry, of industry, of the invisible forces that shape the world. As a chemist, he is not a mere seller of powders and tonics. In a land where industry is still in its infancy, where raw materials must be refined, processed and turned into wealth, a man who understands chemistry is a man with power. He is a bridge between nature and economy, between untapped resources and the thriving markets of the empire. His trade is in solutions, literally and figuratively. Young Samuel watches. He listens. He learns that science is not just something written in books. It is something practical, something that transforms. He sees his father test compounds, measure out ingredients with steady hands, calculate the reactions that will create dyes, medicines, and materials that others will pay for. He learns that wealth is not simply found, it is created. More than that, he absorbs the rhythm of business. He watches as his father negotiates, as he speaks to traders, as he determines the worth of things, not just in their raw form, but in what they can become. A bottle of chemicals can be the difference between failure and success in a factory. A single refined substance can change an industry. Samuel learns that commerce is not just about buying and selling, it is about foresight, about knowing what people need before they even know it themselves. He learns patience. In chemistry, as in business, one cannot rush. A reaction must run its course, a solution must settle, the right moment must be seized, and until then one must prepare. He learns that knowledge is the greatest currency of all, but most of all he learns that a man's future is not determined by where he begins. His father has left behind Britain's rigid society, stepped onto a new continent and built something entirely his own. The lesson is clear. A man can go anywhere, do anything, if he understands the forces that shape the world. And Samuel Cocking understands. Then, in 1853, the world shifted. News arrived from the Far East, carried on the breathless pages of newspapers and spoken in hurried tones among merchants and traders. Japan, a land long shrouded in mystery and fiercely guarded isolation, had been forced open. The Americans, led by Commodore Matthew Perry, had sailed into Edo Bay with their black-hulled steamships, their cannons trained on a country that had, for over 2 centuries, shut itself off from the world. Faced with superior firepower, Japan had little choice but to yield. Its ports, once forbidden, would now accept foreign trade. The news spreads like wildfire. Across the British territories, in the great trading ports of the Pacific, in the parlours of ambitious men, the name Japan is suddenly on every tongue. For more than 2 centuries the country has been closed, an island empire locked in its own traditions, impervious to the tide of Western progress. But now all of that is changing. Commodore Matthew Perry's black ships have forced open the gates, and what was once an enigma is now a land of untapped possibility. The old ways are being shaken, the walls of isolation crumbling. There is talk of trade, industry, and modernity, a nation stepping, blinking, into the light of the industrial age, and it needs men who understand that world. For Samuel, this is not just a curiosity, it is an opportunity. Others see only the chance to make a quick fortune, to flood the new market with foreign goods, to exploit a land just awakening to the outside world. But he sees something else. He sees a country hungry for knowledge, eager to catch up with the great powers of the age. He does not want to be a mere merchant. He wants to be a builder, a modernizer, a man who will leave something lasting behind. And so he makes his choice. He will go to Japan. The ship lurches gently as it glides into Yokohama harbour, the great entrance to a land in transformation. The air is thick with salt and coal smoke, a sharp tang that clings to the skin. The low hum of the sea is drowned out by the human cacophony of a city being born, dock workers shouting, wooden carts groaning under the weight of foreign cargo, the rhythmic clatter of hooves on cobbled streets. As Samuel Cocking steps onto the bustling pier, the scene before him is overwhelming. A maelstrom of cultures, of past and future colliding in a single moment. Chinese coolies in wide straw hats haul heavy crates off foreign steamships, their backs glistening with sweat, their movements efficient, methodical. Their pidgin cries mix with the clipped commands of British traders, men in top hats and long coats, barking orders as they oversee the steady stream of tea chests, silk bundles, and iron machinery being loaded onto waiting rickshaws. Japanese women shuffle past in practical work kimonos, their sleeves tied back, baskets of rice or fish balanced effortlessly on their hips. Some hurry toward the wooden tea houses lining the shore, their interiors glowing with the soft light of paper lanterns, the faint scent of charcoal and sake wafting out through the open doors. Inside, merchants and foreign sailors sit cross-legged on tatami mats, their laughter rising above the steady plucking of a shamisen, the melancholic twang of its strings drifting through the night air. The buildings around him are a patchwork of old and new, a city caught between two worlds. Traditional low-slung wooden structures with curved tile roofs stand alongside hastily built brick warehouses, their chimneys belching black smoke into the grey sky. English signboards hang awkwardly from the eaves of Japanese storefronts, Bolton and Comey Trading, Osborne's Fine Wares, the lettering foreign against the flowing kanji of local shops selling rice wine, lacquerware and fine silks. Beyond the cluttered waterfront, the city stretches outward, winding narrow streets disappearing into the maze of the native town, where paper lanterns flicker above market stalls selling dried fish, pickled plums and steaming bowls of udon. Foreigners are permitted to roam only within the designated treaty port, but even here the presence of the old order remains unshaken. Samurai patrol the streets in pairs, their hakama trousers flowing, hands resting lightly on their katana, silent, watchful, ensuring that the delicate balance between old and new is not disturbed. They move with quiet authority, their top knots slick with camellia oil, their expressions unreadable as they observe the foreigners bringing change to their homeland. And above it all, looming over the chaos, the new western banks and trading houses rise higher than the tiled rooftops of Edo-era Japan. Grand, pale buildings of stone and glass, their facades heavy with columns, their windows glittering with the promise of foreign investment. This is where money changes hands, where the newly opened Japan is sold and reshaped, one transaction at a time. Yokohama is not simply a city, it is a crucible, a storm, a place where old Japan and the modern world have been forced into uneasy coexistence. And Samuel Cocking, standing at its heart, can feel it. The weight of history, the urgency of change, the limitless potential of a land on the brink of something new. He has chosen well. He has arrived at the perfect time, and he is ready to build. He starts where he knows best: commerce, investment, infrastructure. Japan needs capital, and Cocking has the knowledge and experience to bring it. He establishes himself in finance, helping foreign businesses operate in Japan's rapidly changing economy. He is cautious but ambitious, earning the trust of both Western traders and the newly emerging Japanese elite. But he is also watching, learning, He understands that this is a country in transition, torn between the past and the future. He does not force his way in like so many foreign opportunists. Instead, he studies the rhythms of the land, the way business is done, the delicate balance between tradition and progress, and he begins to see something else, a greater ambition, a deeper purpose. Japan is modernizing, but it is doing so without losing itself. Its culture remains intact, its people proud. He sees a country that will not simply copy the West, but shape modernity on its own terms. And he realizes that he wants to be part of that story, not just as a foreign businessman, but as a man who will leave his mark on the land itself. His eyes turn toward Enoshima, a small island, beautiful, spiritual, a place of ancient temples and towering pines, a place where the past lingers, untouched by the factories and telegraph wires creeping across the mainland. And in his mind, a vision begins to take shape, a vision of greenhouses, gardens, industry and nature in harmony, a place where the old and new do not clash, but blend. But Japan was changing, in some cases for the worst, and for all its rush toward modernity, its people were willing to sell their past, to part with even the most treasured relics of their history if the price was right. Western collectors had already begun stripping the country of its cultural treasures, carting away temple bells, ancient scrolls, and even entire buildings to be displayed in European museums or private collections. And so, it was no surprise when Japanese landowners, sensing an eager buyer, offered Kokin the great Buddha of Kamakura. The offer was absurd. The Daibutsu, the towering bronze statue of Amida Buddha that had watched over Kamakura for centuries, was one of the most iconic symbols of Japan. And yet the men standing before Kokin spoke plainly. It could be sold, dismantled, and shipped across the ocean. Many other foreigners would have leaped at the chance, but Kokin did not. He refused. There are things, he told them, that must remain where they belong. But the incident left him troubled. Japan was desperate for progress, but in its desperation, it was willing to sever itself from its own roots. If he was to leave a mark on this land, he resolved, it would not be through destruction, but through creation. If they wish to sell land, he told them, let it be Enoshima. And so he made an offer, and in time they agreed. With his fortune he purchased much of the island, securing vast tracts of land where he would build something new, not factories, not trading posts, but a sanctuary of growth, of nature, of industry and beauty intertwined. At the heart of Kokin's vision was his establishment of the Enoshima greenhouses, which would become a model of agricultural innovation. Kokin built several greenhouses on the island, importing plants from all over the world, tropical species, rare flowers, exotic fruits, and vegetables that had never been seen before in Japan. These weren't just gardens for show, they were practical. He aimed to introduce new farming techniques that could help Japan's growing urban centres, demonstrating how to cultivate food efficiently, how to grow plants in controlled environments, and how to use modern horticultural tools and methods. The greenhouses flourished under his care, with beautiful plants like orchids, roses and tropical palms thriving in the climate-controlled environment. For Japan, whose climate was perfect for a variety of plants, the greenhouses offered new opportunities for growth and a sense of what could be done with modern agricultural science. But it wasn't just about the plants themselves. The greenhouses symbolized a deeper transformation. Kokin understood that the key to Japan's future success was not just in adopting Western technology, but in adapting it to suit Japan's own needs and traditions. Among the innovations Kokin introduced to Japan were electric lights, something that was still in its infancy in the West. The greenhouses were illuminated by electric bulbs, allowing plants to thrive even when the sun was not shining, making the cultivation of certain species possible year-round. The greenhouses became known for the exotic fruits and flowers they cultivated, many of which had never been seen before in Japan. He brought in species from all over the world, bananas, pineapples, and tropical flowers, that would pique the curiosity of the Japanese elite. For a society that revered the natural world, this was a chance to explore the breathtaking diversity of the planet's flora. This English merchant also brought the bicycle to Japan, a land where foot and hoof had ruled for centuries. At first, it was a curiosity, a strange contraption that turned heads and sparked whispers. But soon the Japanese embraced it, weaving it into the rhythm of their daily lives. What began as a foreign novelty became a revolution in motion, one that still spins through the streets of Tokyo and touches every corner of Japan today. By the time Samuel Cocking reached his late 60s, the world around him had changed beyond recognition. The Japan he had first set foot in, that raw and restless nation on the edge of modernity, had transformed into a global power. The country had raced towards the future, steamrolling over the past in its pursuit of progress. And yet, for all the change, for all the ambition, there was a quiet corner of Enoshima where Cocking's legacy still stood. His greenhouses, his investments, the flickering remnants of a dream built with soil, steel, and light. But time is not kind, even to visionaries. By February 1914, Cocking was no longer the energetic young entrepreneur who had arrived decades earlier, eyes full of promise. The man who had fought so fiercely to bring modern ideas to Japan now found himself weary, his body betraying the very spirit that had once carried him across the seas. He had spent his life building, but now life itself was slipping away. On the 26th of February 1914, in the city of Yokohama, Samuel Cocking took his last breath. Some say it was a heart attack, others do not name the cause. Perhaps it was simply the weight of time, the slow, inevitable fading of a man who had given everything to a country that, in many ways, had become his own. Unlike many of his fellow Westerners, Cocking did not rest in the foreigner's cemetery, a place where the merchants, traders, and adventurers of old Yokohama were laid to rest. Instead, he was buried in the Miyata family plot, nestled within a Buddhist cemetery in Yokohama, a final, intimate testament to his deep connection to Japan, to the family he had built, to the culture he had embraced. It was a choice that marked him not as an outsider, but as a man who had woven himself into the very fabric of the land he had come to love. There was no grand monument erected in his honour, no great statue bearing his likeness. His name would not be etched into the history books with the same weight as the politicians and industrialists who shaped the era. But those who had known him, his family, his business partners, the workers who had seen his greenhouses bloom, they remembered. Perhaps in the quiet hours of the evening, as the sun dipped behind Mount Fuji and the evening light dappled the waves that surrounded Enoshima, his spirit still wandered those gardens among the orchids and tropical palms he had nurtured. A man who had arrived as a foreigner but left as something more, something deeper, something lasting. Time moves forward, as it always does. The greenhouses he built would one day be lost, the tides of history washing over them like the waves against the island's shores. But in the soft glow of an electric light, in the spinning wheels of a bicycle on a Tokyo street, in the quiet hum of progress, Samuel Cocking's legacy lives on.